welcome to this week's edition of Shaynel's 3 Cents. I'm your host, the founder and executive director of Our Blended Family, Shaynel Caldwell, and again, welcome. Today we are celebrating International Women's Day, sporting my purple for the occasion, and again, very excited that we've had another opportunity to celebrate the accomplishments of women in industry, women in politics, women in business, women in the community, and again, women everywhere, from mothers to sisters to daughters to cousins to friends. Again, we celebrate you, we appreciate you, and we will do everything that we can to support you. So please, viewers, make sure that that is your mantra for today, and hopefully you can continue that to another day and another week and another month as we continue on. We're going to go into a quick rant, and I'm going to say we because I want you all to be on board with me before we bring out our first guest. Very disappointed about some stuff that's happened this week. Of course, we know that we've got an awesome issue that they had earlier this week with R. Kelly and his ranting and raving and yelling and fussing. And then you had the rebuttal from his girlfriends, so that was quite interesting. We also had an issue that we watched in the news about Michael Jackson and the events that was surrounding the Neverland documentary, about the accusations from people that worked with him, that knew him, and the allegations of pedophilia and whatnot. So that was also kind of interesting as well. But I think the most interesting thing to me that happened this week was our awesome president, Donald Trump, and of course all of his cronies that have been convicted, indicted, and already sentenced. Most recently, Paul Manafort. For those of you that weren't paying attention or that hadn't had an opportunity to get wind of this news, Paul Manafort was facing up to 25 to 30 years in jail for a host of crimes, particularly white-collar crimes for tax evasion, stealing money, bank fraud, lying to Congress, lying to the Senate. I mean, just so many crimes that he had been committed of. There were a host of money that he had been accused, and also there were some fines that they also said that he would have to repay. And I think the last time I checked, it was almost up to $5 million or so that he would have to repay in stolen monies. Now, looking at 25 to 30 years, his sentencing was yesterday. And at his sentencing hearing, he was only sentenced to 3 years and 11 months. So a little less than 4 years. So this gentleman went from facing 25 to 30 years of prison time, federal prison time, to only receiving 3 years and 11 months from defrauding individuals, defrauding banks, and defrauding the government. Now, I wonder if he looked like me and had all this beautiful melanin, if he would have actually got those 25 years. And so it's kind of discouraging to see that not only while we watch the things that happen within our criminal justice system, we watch how these sentencing reports are written, we also watch how the actual courts play out these things, that there's still a huge disparity when it comes to people of color being sentenced to crimes and people that don't have color, i.e. white people, that are not being sentenced the same way that black people are for the same crimes and or similar crimes. So to roll into that, I'm very excited to bring out our first guest after this break, Ms. Khadija Tribble, and we're going to talk about not only the situation, all things marijuana, CBD, and how they affect our community, how they will certainly have an impact on our economy, but also how it impacts the criminal justice system and how so many people that have been touched upon in that area are also looking at the negative impact because of the way that they look, particularly the melanin. So again, with that, we'll be right back after this break with Khadija and, of course, our co-host, KJ, Mr. Valerio Johnson. We'll see you back shortly after this break.
In 2018, I personally helped several people reclaim their healthy lives with a ketogenic lifestyle. Together with our team at Wakaya Perfection, we have helped over 4,000 people struggling with weight loss, burn off unwanted fat naturally, control hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and high cholesterol with our Beulah Fit Keto Fuel Shake and high-impact ginger and turmeric. Contact me for yours. Buttons about that ketolife.mywakaya.com. That's BUTTONSBOUTTATEOLIFE.MYWAKAYA.com or call 202-875-3926.
We're ready. Welcome back to this week's edition of Shaynel's 3 Cents, and we are here with our awesome guest today, Miss Khadija Tribble from Marijuana Matters. Woo. And then, of course, our co-host, Mr. V.J. Johnson, Mr. Valerio Johnson.
How that look?
Looking like a beautiful, handsome leprechaun.
Oh, that hat dope.
That hat is dope, though.
So again, Khadija, why don't you share with our guests who you are and why we invited you out here today?
Well, I just want to say thank you for talking to me a couple of weeks ago. I know I was on the road and there was a little, background noise, and I'm happy to be on set today. And the reason I keep talking about Marijuana Matters everywhere I go, because people are like, what is this almost 50-year-old middle-aged black woman out here talking about marijuana all the time? Why? Well, there are 3 main reasons. One, obviously, the criminal justice issue continues to be a huge issue for African Americans and Latinos. And it's not just because people are locked up. I need people to understand that anyone with a marijuana-related arrest, conviction, or incarceration stands to have about 2,300 collateral consequences related to that offense. And
2,300?
Collateral consequences.
What does that mean?
So at the end of the day, there's an actual story. There's a former student at the University of Maryland, a young kid who was playing basketball, him and his friends, walking back to campus. They got stopped. We know that black men who are gathered together are more likely to be stopped for no reason whatsoever.
Gathering while black?
Exactly. In this instance, one of the guys had marijuana on them. That individual actually received a fine and was arrested, got booked, was able to go back to school, but as a consequence of being charged with a marijuana possession, he lost access to financial aid. So when I say collateral consequences, when someone is arrested or convicted or incarcerated related to a drug offense, more times than not is often marijuana for possession, they lose access to things that help them, whether that's housing subsidies, whether that's scholarships or financial aid. And when we think about the compounding impact of what that's like 2 or 3 generations later, we're looking at serious deficits, and we can connect that to the wealth gap disparities that we see between black people and white people. If you lost opportunities and the things that you need that are generally available to help you move out of poverty or to help move you into the middle class, you no longer have access to those things because you now have a marijuana-related offense in your background. Then what? What's the alternative? You can't get a job because you have that in your background. And depending on how long ago and how strong that offense is, you might not even have the ability to work in a chosen field.
Right.
There's actually a woman out of Baltimore who used marijuana for her anxiety and depression, was arrested for possession, lost access to her license as a social worker. Wow. So her livelihood is now at stake for something that she uses for medicinal reasons.
Absolutely.
So that's what I mean by that.
Touch on what you said earlier about the young man losing his financial aid. I believe that was something that they changed in 2017 regarding the federal student loan program, to where if you were convicted of a drug-related offense, you will lose access to all of your federal student financial aid. And I come from California, where we also know California is a state where you can utilize it legally, but just because you're able to utilize it in the state does not mean that it's still okay when it comes to federal consequences. And so I actually know people that those actual problems have happened to them in the state of California. So it's kind of one of those things where we need to figure out what's the best way to regulate this, what's the best way to inform people about it, and to also view, what is it that you're weighing? How do we weigh our options?
Right.
Right. And what avenues can we take for advocacy?
Right. Even here in the district, I mean, Initiative 71 decriminalized marijuana. And it said that you can carry marijuana on your persons up to a certain amount. It didn't give you any other ways in which you think about how to transact business and or share your product. So we can grow up to 12 plants in the District of Columbia.
Do you think that was a benefit to folks because there weren't any actual guidelines written?
It depends on how you look at it. I think in some ways, yes, it was a benefit. It was an opportunity for some people to exploit the system. But for our community, it was very harmful. We have young people not understanding that weed isn't just because weed is decriminalized in marijuana, it doesn't allow you to now have pop-ups. You know, we have a lot of folks who are still being arrested, and the pop-up brigade is what I like to call them. But people
look, our West Coast folks, can you let them know what a pop-up is?
So that's where we take over some empty site, and we put vendors in it, set up tables, and we transact business like a swap meet for the folks on the West Coast.
Look, they know what swap meets are. Good analogy.
And so, in many respects, they were, figuring out how they can actually transact business, continue the culture here in D.C. But the raids continue to happen. But also, I need people to just because I'm a proponent of legalization doesn't mean that there's not some responsibility that we have to do it in a way that doesn't cause more harm. Like, we need more research to help us understand what marijuana does to one's body when you use it over a long period of time, or if you start early, or when you use this amount. And I think we need to make sure with any legalization effort that there are 2 or 3 things that we pay attention to: the economic argument and entrepreneurship opportunities, by putting communities that have been disproportionately harmed at the forefront of that particular piece. And we also need to pay attention to the research arm. VJ has heard me talk about wanting to push HBCUs to be a little bit more aggressive in the cannabis space, because research is needed, and we know that Black people in general, there are lack of representation in research studies from our community, but we need to be on the forefront of that in terms of securing those research dollars from the feds and making sure our people are part of that research.
So you think UDC, the district's land grant institution, could
Absolutely. I actually
jump in that space?
I think it's interesting. I've been reaching out to UDC, and I've had a conversation with some folks down at the Wilson building about, once we're comfortable that the feds are not going to come after academic institutions for their 501c3 status, or go after their donors or any other thing that they'll be in jeopardy of, that UDC should be thinking about positioning itself as a major player for this area. Why not have University of California, Santa Cruz has a cannabis research institute. Why shouldn't we have that in D.C.?
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I think UDC used to have a robust horticulture program where if you were in the lawn care or field maintenance or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think
UDC
they still
had
do.
that, right?
Yeah, I think they still do.
It was robust many years ago, and I think it's a small program now, but
And
they
there
can
are
get
a
some
lot of-
funding to grow it and expand it. I mean, because
I'm going to move this.
No, I'm
Sorry.
going to move your mic.
Okay. I hear
Oh, is that what that is? Okay.
Yes, sorry.
Look, there are a lot of HBCUs that have agricultural programs,
my
particularly
undergrad,
down in the
Savannah
South.
State.
Right.
Savannah State was a land grant institution for the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
Now, I know when you were a guest on the show and we were able to listen to you on the telephone, you talked a little bit about some of the differences, because when people hear marijuana, the first image that pops into their heads, compliments of the FBI.
What?
First image that pops into your head are hippies. And then look, as
Mine
we
is
move,
Snoop Dogg.
look, can I
Okay,
can I
my
put this
bad.
on a timeline?
Right.
So, of course, back in the 70s, you looked at the hippies. And, of course, most of the hippies were white, the long hair. And they're like, oh, they don't work. They're a bunch of bums. They're lazy. And, of course, we move into the 21st century. And you think of marijuana, you think of people of color. Oh, again, same thing. Oh, they're lazy. They're not going to work. All they're doing is sitting around smoking. But that's not just what marijuana is. There are a couple different branches of what that actual plant does, and then the different types of plants. So if you could go back a little bit, kind of the conversation before about the differences between the THC and the CBD.
Yeah. So, and I'll even do a shout out before the 70s or 60s, the whole cannabis versus marijuana argument that now if you're paying attention to this community, there is some discussion around whether we should continue to use the name marijuana.
Right.
And that is because in the 30s and 40s, obviously Latinos and our Mexican brothers and sisters were demonized, and marijuana was a way to speak negatively about that community. So I think we need to
Cheech and Chong and
right
their movies.
exactly
Have been.
yeah. So we need to make sure that we reflect the historical record, and we have some sensitivities to that. But here we are in 2019, and marijuana is so much a part of a culture. The name in and of itself. Before we decide to discard the name, I want us to actually make sure that we include everybody into the conversation of where we are right now. So in terms of the plant, so there is the cannabis plant in and of itself, and how do people distinguish between THC and CBD? You know, there's still not enough research out there for us to be like, oh, well, this is this and this does that. But I hope that, you know, with the feds, the FDA, HHS, USDA now being mandated through some legislative decree, I think last year, that says that we need to put some money into research, that we're actually going to be able to have the science that tells us what the difference is. Mm-hmm. But just anecdotally, CBD is generally used in the medicinal arm, and people think about THC in terms of the getting high form. But, you know, I think even if folks were just using purely THC, that there might be some value in that as well, from a medicinal standpoint. But we need the research to help back that up. I was in California last week for Lesbians Who Tech, talking about marijuana and having a lot of great fangirl moments. Just shout out to Lesbians Who Tech. That was a great conference last weekend. But I had a chance to sit in on a group of activists during an equity session. And I really appreciate the folks out in California for moving this conversation forward about equity in cannabis and actually laying out a model for what other people in this country can actually do in terms of educating. There's a lot of education we have to do for our community, but the broader community as well, in terms of how one thinks about consuming marijuana and why you would consume marijuana, anywhere from the medicinal to the social. What does that look like for you? So,
let me again back you up a little bit.
Okay.
When we tend to talk about drug offenses and we look at the numbers of incarcerated individuals because of that, most people, because of the way that we've demonized crimes and divided them in, as I mentioned earlier, with the white-collar crimes versus all other types of crimes, we do see that there is a disproportionate amount of people of color that are being arrested, and people tend to tie all drugs into, if you're doing drugs, you're probably a person of color.
Right.
And so I think that within our community, and I actually attended a town hall a couple months ago up in Anne Arundel County with regard to the new push that we're doing for drugs, which of course is meth for one, and then heroin, because we're starting to see, oh, well, this whole opioid crisis, we got to check and make sure that our people are safe. And now we have to finally pass laws because these poor, unfortunate people are starting to be harmed by these drugs, these opioids. And there's not a lot of people that look like us, you know, that's going to the hospital for opioid use and meth and all that good stuff. So I'm also trying to look at the numbers because people still think that it's just us that go to jail for drug crimes.
No, I mean, other people go to jail for drug crimes, but when we look at like the 700,000 folks who were arrested or caught a charge last year for marijuana-related offenses, overwhelmingly those people were African Americans and Latinos. At the same time,
is it that we're not smart enough that we getting arrested, or I mean, why aren't other people getting arrested at those same numbers?
Well, I mean,
what's your speculation?
Well, you know, they will tell you they get calls in from the community to come out that somebody's, you know, doing this or that, and in the process of responding to those calls, that they, you know, find drug paraphernalia or drugs themselves. And I'm not saying that that's not happening, but I also think we have to acknowledge that our community has been over-policed from the beginning. And so if you, I mean, the kid that's at NY State walking down the street, I mean, there's an excellent video that DPA put out with Jay-Z a few years ago around the reality of what's happening for a black person that lives in New York City that will carry about this much weed versus what the white kid will get for carrying the same amount of weed.
And this is a legal amount of weed.
This is legal, right? Yeah, this is like less than, it's like 3, it's a 3.5. So,
now, what is the legal amount in the district?
So I think you can carry up to 2 ounces of flour on you. But I mean, even when we think about the regulations and how we write laws, you know, you might have, you could have
That's a lot of weed.
What's a lot of weed? And 2 ounces of weed, you know, you could say it's a lot, but you carry it on your persons. But what if you carry it in some other form, in some concentrate, or you got a dab, or you have, I mean, there's no, I mean, our laws need to make sense for what's happening in the culture, right? So, I mean, we're always looking for the flower, but, you know, if you're a person who might not be smoking marijuana, you have it in an edible form or some other kind of form, then you're less likely to catch a charge.
So what's this? Let's talk about it.
So, yeah, well, let me...
Is that hand cream? Drink some of the hand cream.
What is it?
It is. So there's a product by Elio. Shout out to the Hollingsworth company out of Washington State, Black-owned cannabis farm. They really doing big things. Raft and Joy and their entire family of cool people. So they have this CBD soothing salve that I've been using because I'm old. And when I go out and party at night, I need to come back and grease my knees up. So this is a salve. It's called Elio. And yeah, so you can try it out. It has CBD. It's nothing psychoactive. Yeah, hey, you know.
I wasn't going to go there, but leave it to VJ. So.
I mean, everybody laugh for me. You get it?
It has mint in it. You can smell
this
it.
smells good.
It smells like mint.
Yeah, so yeah,
good.
you can
You
actually
smell
see what's on the product. Shout out to Aunt Jackie, who is...
So if I use this, what happens?
You'll get some relief for your pain.
Pain relief.
Yeah, there's no THC in that. It's CBD based.
You know, we did have a president that suffered from polio back in the day that utilized various forms of marijuana to help ease his illness and ease the pains that he had at that time.
Yeah, we might need to give it to our current
that.
president to help him out too. Maybe he can, you know, reduce some of his anxiety.
When we talk about transporting, I tend to make it a joke that, you know, if you're a consumer of a product, you look at how often you consume, how often you make purchases. When I go to the grocery store, am I buying groceries for 1 week? Or am I buying groceries for the month? And so it kind of makes sense because I know there was an NFL player that got picked up not too long ago. He got arrested because apparently he had a large amount on him. And they said, oh, well, you're a dealer. And I'm like, well, no. It's a difference from me going to the grocery store once a week versus shopping and getting groceries for the month.
It's like going to Costco.
Yeah.
You can buy 4.
Super size.
Right. I mean, it's cheaper. Everybody knows the more you buy, the price goes down, right? And I also think if you are someone who uses and consumes consistently, do you want to have to go in a situation where you're vulnerable, particularly if you're someone famous, right? To put yourself out there every time you go. If you go once every couple of months, then, you know, why not? Right. But I just think we have this.
You got Uber Eats for.
You got Uber Eats,
Can we do Uber Eats? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's all kinds of business opportunities.
Shout out to Uber.
That's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the money. Are we there yet? Let's talk.
She's talking the stats and the crime stats, which is very important.
What I want to do is one of the slides that I want to put up. Unfortunately, our Facebook folks won't be able to see this, but we're going to go ahead and take a quick look at the slide. But it shows this is from the Board of Prisons. But it shows how many people are actually, and this is actually updated as of February 28th, how many folks that we have in the state prisons. And it's very interesting that you have folks that are in state prisons, and then you have folks that are in the local jails, and then it bells down to the federal side, and then you look at the youth. You see that there's a large number of us, and they say, oh, it's just those people of color that are in the prisons. But it's really not. And y'all have to forgive me. My other slide wasn't able to pull up. Ron, you can take that down. But I'm going to try to pull it up a little bit later. But it's not mostly us, people that look like us that are in jail, in prison. Why? Because it's not us. We're not the majority of the population. You know, the majority of the folks that are incarcerated in either the prisons or the jails are what they call non-people of color, are white people. And so when you look at the drug offenses, there's still more of them, but when we look at the concentration of the population, it's more of us.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, because you know we are a small segment of the population, but in terms of the prison population,
we
percentage-wise,
we're balling out.
And then when you think about why we're there, and you know, someone was, you know, I was on Armstrong Williams a couple of.
How he doing?
I was a host, so I mean, I didn't go out with him or anything. We want, you know.
Okay, I found it.
So the interesting thing, that the argument is always, well, if something is illegal, then people shouldn't do it. And I was like, well, you know, it used to be illegal for black people to be able to read. It used to be illegal for black people to be free. And I'm just so glad that there were folks who said, illegal or not, this is my right. And so we have to begin to question the thing that we call illegal. Why is it illegal in the first place? And if it is truly illegal, then how is it black people don't use at a higher rate than other folk? We don't sell actually at a higher rate than other folks, because when you look at who's growing marijuana, and
it's not us.
The people who are growing that I've met are people who look that's what all the growing places that I've gone. And so, and I don't begrudge that, but how is it that you can grow tons of weed in upstate Massachusetts, but the brother or sister who is selling the 3.5 is the one who's doing the time? And and so we have to question the legal system, because it's not as if it's always been impartial and equal. And so, I say to those folks who argue you shouldn't be doing illegal stuff, well, I mean, a thing is illegal to it isn't illegal anymore. And here we are now in a state of both illegality and legal, and black folks are still being disproportionately harmed by that. And so we have to have some honest dialogue about, when we move to this space of legalization, and as a person, just individual, not my company, not any of the other things that I'm a part of, I'm a reparations person. I believe black folks are owed something. And, one of the biggest arguments consistently, one, we can't quantify it, but I think you can. And two, you can't pay for it. And I was like, well, rather than government getting all this tax money for government to go build a road or do anything else, before you do that, then you need to give people what they are due and use
after
these
y'all
tax.
Fix that section of BW Parkway.
Yeah. Y'all can raise some private equity and pay us to do that. One of these companies. I mean, I think
want to get reparations from the gentleman down south of the border that got arrested for trafficking. So I'm like, let's take some of his money, and get all the money that he owed. So we'll go from there. So, but that does pose a good point, VJ, that you said that the whole economics of it all. Why is it that we can't make money from this, or they don't want to legalize it? What are we afraid of? What do we think the government is trying to do, aside from making sure that they make their money and get their cut?
Let's talk about it. How can we?
I mean,
the rules are what they are. I mean, how do we play within them?
And or extend them. I mean, I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, I'm not interested in being at anyone's table. I'm interested in convening the table. And we need to be inviting folks.
Can we set up a table?
The tables are being set, and I think we as people of color who don't necessarily aren't overly knowledgeable about this, one thing we can do is to reduce the stigma. So when you see a sister who's talking about marijuana, don't automatically assume that I'm just a pothead. Yeah. Not that, and shout out to the potheads, but there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. But there's a whole ecosystem when we talk about the cannabis industry. Sure, there's the obvious. You got the flower itself, you got the growing, you have the distribution arm of it. But let's just even think about this. Look at this packaging. All of these things are mandated by regulations, labeling, design work. I mean, even what you put it in, how you actually deliver it. So there's just so many ways that you can begin to think about how someone, particularly our community, which is so fly. I mean, there's just nothing that we don't, knock out of the park. How and all the ways in which marijuana has been a part of our community. I started, I have one of my interns working on literally cataloging just moments in video in hip hop history where we've captured marijuana in a video, or somebody's worn some paraphernalia or something. I was just watching on Netflix. There's a new show with Alfre Woodard. I think it's called Juanita. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but it just came out. And in the clip, she's smoking a joint. So it's just so much a part of who we are, but it's been demonized, right? And so let's think about all the ways in which we could make money in this industry. Those
you
people.
You mentioned earlier the packaging. You look at, and I'm happy to say this for financial freedom. Information. I have vested money in a variety of different types of stocks that's related to that, and one of them is companies that actually package. Because as you see here, we have the plastic bags, we have the cups, the zippered bags. They have the actual foam, the styrofoam that is packaged in and shipped to different places within the states, within the country of Canada. So it literally touches on every part of the economy. Absolutely. That we can monetize this thing.
All right.
So
people are always asking me, I know where you're going.
About where
yeah. Well, you can ask your question, but I think dispensaries are cool. I mean, I'm not knocking anyone. If you want to invest in a dispensary or own a dispensary, hey, go do it. But I try to think about long money. What does it take to produce a good product? So you're going to need some good sunlight, and if you don't have sunlight, you're going to need exactly soil, and you're going to need tons of knowledge.
Scott, who's also got a couple $1 billion invested in the industry.
You better watch yourself. I'm trying to tell you. So
that's the fertilizer company, right?
Yes,
right,
it is.
Absolutely. Because this is grown, and we have aquaponics that's also becoming a part of this conversation.
High time, baby.
Right.
I can't remember the name of the company, but there's a company that produces filtered water that they distribute out in Canada for the for manufacturing. So
it's funny you said that. I think like in 2012, 2011, I was the chair of a commission at Ward 7, and there was a guy trying to set up a cultivation center where DC Eagle is now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And the little old ladies in the neighborhood was like, nope. And me doing my job, I had to say no too.
Right.
But who knew 7 years ago if I'd have kept that relationship? So look, no, all jokes aside. So from where we are in the District of Columbia, how do we prepare people of color, I like to say African Americans, to prepare themselves to get a piece or a large piece or a part of this pie? Like, can we put like a how-to guide together and say, well, you don't have the millions to come in from the top, but if you wanted to get to a couple 100,000, could we do crowdsourced funding?
Right.
If you wanted to just be on the local distribution side, like what is step 1, step 2, step 3, right? And I know part of it is all about education. Do we start with forums and workshops and say, hey, these are the laws, these are the parameters, and then like how do we move a community of folk into this industry like we did with the green economy 10 plus years ago?
Right.
How do we pipeline our kids into, or our teenagers or our young adults or our entrepreneurial folks, right? Let's talk about that. How do we do that?
Okay, wait. Let me hijack that real quick.
Oh God, you don't want to make money.
No, because I also want Khadijah to share, and I like interrupting you. So I want Khadijah to share a little bit.
The perpetual offender or something?
The habitual offender. I want Khadijah to share a little bit about her advocacy, because if you look at economics and you look at the spirit of entrepreneurship, people that are good at one thing should be allowed to continue in that one thing. And a lot of the folks that have been charged with marijuana-related offenses are actually prohibited from taking part in the economics of continue to grow on the legal side.
Right.
And again, what sense does that make if I'm good at making shampoo and I get arrested for making shampoo because it was illegal? When you legalize the manufacturing of shampoo, why shouldn't I be able to continue my business on the side of legal and on a legal side where in an area that I have expertise?
But to your point, those people are called consultants, and they still can make money advising those who aren't. Right? So let's look at the positives. Let's look at this
Y'all
from
hear that?
an asset base. I mean, look, I got him right here on the phone right now. Like, dude, like that's what they've been doing since we was little, right? So, and young, I didn't say little, but if that's what you know, why you can't talk to somebody who don't know that got the resources or the education or the connections? That's another way to make money. Your knowledge and your expertise. Okay, so what? You can't open up a shop, but that don't mean you can't make $200-300 an hour telling somebody else how to.
Right. You're absolutely right. I think you have to get in where you fit in, and so Marijuana Matters is started precisely for that reason. Yes, Marijuana Matters. Precisely for that reason. We do 3 things at Marijuana Matters. We do a robust education campaign focused on individuals who are either consumers and or interested in being in the industry. And if you go to our website, which is www.marijuana-matters.com, or follow me.
I am, as she finished.
Or follow me on Instagram at MPT Lifestyles with an S at the end of it. I do share information often. We just had a couple of meetings We're getting ready for April, which is, Weed Month, 420 coming
420,
up.
baby.
Yes.
Really?
And we're going to have a series of activities.
Never heard of 420.
Yeah. Oh, wow,
You have it?
Girl. Wow. We got
Look,
to
I'm
make
from
sure
Oakland.
you
Come on
know.
now.
You from Oakland? And you heard of 420?
Look, I'm being facetious, girl.
Anyway, so to answer your
I'm
question.
sorry, the website one more time for our viewers.
www.marijuana-matters.com. It's just right now. We're going to launch the full site in April, but there was so much energy focused on it. We wanted to put something up so people at least be able to reach out to us. And at the end of the day, there are tons of opportunities. Whether someone wants to own a dispensary or whether they want to use their expertise as, subject matter experts, right? And so I think that it's important though that we do not, in the law, discriminate against folks. People should have an option to play in the lane that makes sense for whatever their skill set and or aspirations are.
Right.
But my issue is that, when Agrasso, who is a proponent of legalization, writes in his legalization or regulation and tax bill in D.C. that says anyone who's been arrested since the passage of Initiative 71 can't participate when we regulate and tax it because you guys didn't regulate and tax it before. Like if someone got caught up in the pop-up stings that were going on in the raids, they won't have the opportunity to participate in the regulated market. I think that's a failure of government.
Yeah, that's shady.
For whatever reason, you didn't write the regulations. And I
correctly,
understand that we have a federal oversight committee that, prohibits a lot of our growth in terms of D.C. But at the end of the day, don't penalize the regular D.C. resident who probably supported Initiative 71 because you didn't give them a lane to actually participate. And now you're going to penalize them. I think that's foul and that's messed up. But in terms of all of the ways in which the ecosystem comes alive for us, no one can get down and party like D.C. And I know, people talk about New York, Cali, and Miami, but as you know, D.C., yeah. D.C., we get it in. So, I think there should be entertainment licenses that are, social consumption licenses that speak to a culture here in D.C. that is specific to how we get down. It might not, the licensure that happened in Oakland and in Mass may not look the same for D.C. So what people need to do first is make sure that D.C. gets the regulations right first. So you need to pay attention to what's coming down. And there's some bills that have been introduced. David Grosso, I hear that the Health Committee is introducing some stuff. So there's some things coming out, and we need to pay attention. We're going to
get involved in the town halls. And make
absolutely.
Sure you're putting your voice in.
Yeah, and I just want to give a shout out to Jay Mills, Tori, Keto, a lot of folks who are working around the equity piece. Equity, I think it's Equity Now or EFA, Equity for All, who are trying to figure out how they move and push this conversation forward. But I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that we've been traumatized by marijuana. Our relationship to marijuana is complicated as a community. While we've consumed it, we've used it for economic gains, that hasn't come without risk and sacrifices. And so in many respects, I get why we're struggling right now, because it's like marijuana, for many people, has symbolized a gateway not to other drugs, but gateway to poverty in an insane way. Because if you just think about it, if someone loses their parent because they were in, the drug game, whether it was crack and marijuana or heroin and marijuana, then let's think about what that means for that family that loses that person and that income and whatever else, right? And then as a result of that loss, we have all of these things that are happening in families that are multiplied on communities. And I know you know what I'm talking about when we talk about places in Southeast where we have one bad judgment or one bad mistake is just amplified for our communities that are already struggling. So a bad decision turns into something that creates generational poverty. And and marijuana and other drugs are connected to that. And so now we are legalizing marijuana without really addressing some of the trauma related to that. And I get it. When I went to talk to the black farmers, they were like, we don't want nothing to do. Can I curse on here? No. Okay, they don't want blank to do with weed.
Shit.
Right? because marijuana symbolized to them a destruction of the community. And so when I'm telling them, you ain't making enough on this sweet potato farm, so let's think about hemp. Let's think about marijuana as a crop. They're like,
but isn't
hell
hemp
no.
illegal?
Not anymore. Thank to Mitch McConnell. Shout out to Kentucky. So the Farm Bill passed in December, and it had a hemp rider on it.
Yep.
So they legalized
December
hemp.
2018.
Yes, baby.
Look, Mr. Awesome Mitch McConnell.
Yes. Who locked down the hemp industry in Kentucky and Colorado.
Yeah, who's got his millions invested as well.
I'm really thinking about marijuana and trying to conceptualize how you've just articulated that. Like, I'm from crack, DC, right? And I think crack.
I'm from Sacramento.
Right. So crack, DC, I feel you. If you'd have said that, crack, DC, yes, I get it. Lies, laws, jail, generations of people just gone forever. And I'm trying to think, growing up in the city, I can remember marijuana or weed being so, wasn't as violent, it wasn't as harmful in my mind. But I'm listening to you, I'm visualizing, maybe because the two extremes, right? You know, crack was just way over here destructive. It's like weed's like, oh, I can do that, peddle that, get away with that, get a little bit of money, right? But thinking about it the way you explained it just now, like, wow.
Well, they
it's
didn't
the
make
same.
Yeah.
If you get caught,
I was
it's
about
the
to say same thing. 3 strikes you're out. You know, mandatory minimums. They didn't care if it was marijuana or crack, right?
It didn't matter what you had.
And so, it ended up being the same. It is crazy.
Yeah.
And I took for granted when I started this. You know, I've been talking about, as you know, marijuana for a long, long time. My own personal story, just with having 4 sons who. Are
we raffling this?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm just.
No.
Somebody asked me. I was just in the hat.
No
raffling.
The hat belongs to me, though. The hat is mine.
So I know tons of families that have a personal story related to someone connected to a marijuana charge or whatever. And but I took for granted. So this has become, my advocacy has become my therapy. But it wasn't until I started engaging more deeply with other activists that I realized just how the way we've had to move and operate in the shadows causes so much distrust and angst. So when we're like telling people that this is coming, there's an opportunity, people are like, nah, it ain't gonna happen, or no,
I don't want to do that.
It's just, it's just so much. And one of the things I am not necessarily struggling with, because I am not necessarily the most religious person, but I did grow up in the church and have understood both personal and in the teachings that if you do right, right will follow you. And so we're going to figure this thing out. But I would say to folks who are listening, who are thinking that they may have an interest, or they just want to know how to help their family member that's coming home,
we should know.
Then let's just, let's continue.
Back in society as well.
Yeah, and Marijuana Matters is going to have, during the National Cannabis Festival, we're going to have a healing gathering. So look for that on the website. I'll do a Facebook event. I'm just trying to lock in this venue where we're going to have some folks who do healing work that's culturally competent for us to come into this space, address some of the harms that we've experienced and how it shows up for us, and hopefully begin to kind of heal this movement, because it's so important.
National Cannabis Fest. Where are we this year? You know Caroline?
I've met Caroline. Yeah. And National Cannabis is going to be at RFK. It's going back to RFK.
What was it from last year?
Yeah,
Are you trying to get it in y'all venue?
This is 2 different spaces.
Yeah, we're going to be there. We're gonna have a presence. And this is another thing, and this is not a dig at anybody who's getting their money for holding conferences and doing these Eventbrite events and charging. I'm just never going to charge for the information. I just think
knowledge.
We have to share the information as best we can. We can't, $50 to show up at an event here in D.C. is a barrier for some folks. And I don't think there needs to be a barrier at this point. So Marijuana Matters is going to keep self-funding opportunities to engage and share information. I'm hopeful that we're going to find some donors who will support an equity summit where we'll bring people and pay folks to come and be in a room to really talk about a national strategy for, because, the federal legalization is here, it's upon us. Even faster than we think. I mean, every single day there's somebody else who is talking about a marijuana bill or introducing. There was just a first time a bipartisan free to weed bill, I like to call it, legalizing marijuana from both a Republican and a Democrat in Congress. And so I'm not sure if it'll happen this year, but I think this is the closest we've been to having some federal legalization efforts out there. And I think by 2020, for sure, we're looking at a federalized state, and we need to be organized to address that.
Who are those leaders? I think this last wave of congressional representatives, they represent like this movement, right? To push beyond those boundaries. So who are some of the people we should support or follow?
Sure.
That's a good question.
Yeah, so Representative Barbara Lee, who is the head of, co-head of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus. Yeah, we got a caucus,
they
right?
got a caucus in the Congress.
Yes. Just, I think they announced February, so there are 3 leaders. And so I know Barbara Lee is a part of that. Obviously, Cory Booker, when he first got to the Senate, he introduced the Marijuana Justice Act. He reintroduced it. He has more co-sponsors.
Presidential candidate Cory Booker?
Yes, presidential candidate Cory Booker. Yeah, he's running. Yeah, he's running. Kamala Harris, I think, Senator Kamala Harris, presidential candidate, has also said that, she's all about the weed, because her family from wherever they're from. I know. I mean, I didn't say it. She said it.
And she was smoking with Tupac and Biggie. No, what was it? Anyway,
I'm not even. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. So, and so Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
OAC.
Yeah, who has talked about it. I have some misgivings about the way in which she languaged it. And that's why it's important that we as a community are organized so that folks understand the nuances. It's not just about legalizing marijuana, because you can legalize it and our community still not benefit.
It's still
So we need,
would be status quo.
Right?
Status
and
quo.
So, I am very clear, at least Marijuana Matters actually has a couple of our core tenets, and one of them, there is no legalization without expungement of every marijuana offense, period, in the discussion. And people shouldn't have to go and say, hey, in 1978 I had this one charge, can you look and see if you guys are, it should be automatic. And it should be on the government to do it. The second piece is that there should be a priority given to individuals from communities that have been over-policed and over-criminalized for marijuana in the discussion for us.
I love that.
And the third thing is to be very clear about where those tax revenue dollars go. And I think Grasso's plan, he says that he would like for $1 million to go to behavioral health. I think behavioral health is important, but it can't fund the behavioral health failures that are consistent in the district right now. I mean, anybody can look and say that we have some problems with how we respond consistently across the board to our folks who are in need of behavioral and mental health. So I'm not interested in funding failures. So I think we have to be very clear about where those tax dollars go. And I think, if I were looking at the local level, I think money should be set aside to, for DC in particular, if the NEAR Act is underfunded, if that's the reason why we can't get there, then put the money behind the NEAR Act. So I think we have to give local and state jurisdictions some leeway on where those tax revenues collected should go.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth mentioning a lot of the information that you put out, Khadijah. And you joked earlier about, people see you, they think you just a pothead talking about marijuana. Yeah. But just the length of your educational background and looking at the research and the people that you've partnered with to come to the conclusions and to, put out the information that you have, I think that that's also worth noting.
Shout out to the Kennedy School.
If you're a pothead, why I've never seen you smoke before?
And you never will.
Like, how are you doing
I don't
that?
get down like that.
It's illegal to smoke outside on the corners. That's why.
I mean, this is my friend right here. I'm trying to think. We've been some places, and I'm trying to remember.
Yeah. I mean, you know.
Well, maybe I can't remember.
No comment. Again, we just want to keep in mind that as we have these conversations, it's absolutely important for us to value each other's opinions. But more importantly, you all know my favorite four-letter F word is fact.
Oh.
I like free too, but it's facts. We actually have to look at the facts, and we need to look at the research, and we need to make sure we're looking and reading information from credible resources. And I think those of you that are watching today, and those of you that we've had these conversations in the last 2 weeks on social media about why marijuana matters and why we're talking about it, because the facts show that it's important. It's certainly something that's going to help rejuvenate our communities, help rehabilitate them, and of course also help educate us about what our next steps are and what we can look forward to in our future. And so I'm very excited about the work that you're doing and what Marijuana Matters is doing. And of course we want to make sure that our folks can connect with you, the people that enjoyed the content that we had today. Can you tell our people again how to get in touch with you?
So right now we're focused on Instagram because that apparently is all the rage in this circle of target audience. So MPT Lifestyles is my Instagram handle, and Marijuana Matters DC is the handle for the organization. We also have a website, which it looked like it might have been trouble getting on it, but I'll go back and check and see. But it is www.marijuana-matters.com. And yeah, stay tuned.
Awesome. So again, we want to say thank you so much for coming out to talk to us, Khadija. We'll certainly have this information blasted again on our Facebook page, our Twitter, and also our IG page so that you can connect with her and get involved in the advocacy. And tell a friend. I know we touched a little bit about the economics, but there's certainly more to come. This is certainly ground level, and as we said a couple weeks ago, you want to be in on this grassroots effort of not only revitalizing your own pockets, monetizing it, but also making sure that you know what's going on and that you can make sure that you're of assistance and help to your community in this area. So again, we want to say thank you so much for coming out. Of course, VJ, our favorite black leprechaun, shout out to that hat.
Can we talk about this hat real quick?
Yeah, we can shout out.
Because we can make these, right? How much does this hat cost?
Well, so it was made actually in Cape Town, South Africa. Thank you, Sunita, for bringing it back for me. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to say how much it costs because you know my markup might be.
I was gonna say yeah.
And it comes with a gift.
Don't tell them the retail.
It comes with a gift.
No, it don't.
It can, depending on where it's sold.
So again, we want to thank you for coming out today. And again, we want to
you.
thank you, our viewership on Facebook, and of course those of you watching on YouTube Live, and those of you that will catch us again. We appreciate everything that you guys are doing and how you're supporting the program, and of course supporting the station on VoxWave. And we hope you like everything that we said today, but if not, at least you heard it. We'll see you back next week.